when I said earlier about the over-reliance on the collective bargaining model, I do recognize the validity and the importance of having a negotiation process, because it's in a sense it's a strategy to address some of the unequal power relations at the table. However, my comment was based in the reality within the workplaces that the organized labor, in a sense, we've been so comfortable and we have conformed to this mode of operation for so long that is at the detriment on the radicalizations, the activism of our union members in the workplace. So part of that shifting, it's recognizing that how much do we need to, I mean, maybe the question need to be raised among the trade union folks is how much do we need to wed within this whole bureaucratic and legislative model of collective bargaining, that you can't go out on strike until you have the no board, which would be issue 17, 19 days, anyway, when the conciliations breaks down. But in that whole process, those are the, I think I sort of identified with Karen Lewis saying that these are master's tools, and we end up dancing around to the tune. And so part of this is how can we as labor take advantage, not take advantage, but it's committed to a process of continuous mobilizing, both in the workplace and in the community. How can we seize a workplace problem, be it a grievance or a concern that's raised by one person, and turn it into, to see whether this is shared by a whole group of workers, and how can we move that forward and making sure we can win something from the employers. I mean, at this point, it's, I guess it's recognizing if we're here for the long haul, it's how do we keep building people's confidence and break some of that dependence on the union reps, on the bargaining process, and on that and the legislative framework, and recognize that, I mean, in a way, Ajamu talks about educations. I mean, we can go back to the very basic, that whole model or that whole slogan that among rank and file members, it's we are the union. It's the members that are the union. And that whole notions that individually we beg, collectively we bargain. So in that collective process, how can we bargain with integrity and with that sense of resistance, that every workplace grievance, every problem has become part of that ongoing process of resistance.
When we look at the question of how do we generalize resistance, and how do we support unions while critiquing them? We're talking about a long-term change that we must engage in. Because today, it's only 7% of the working class that work in an environment that's governed by a collective agreement. So you have 70% of the working class that are not a part of the union. Part of the work that we have to do is also to radicalize that section of the working class. And as Winnie was saying, that whatever, when an issue comes up, it may be in the workplace, but it may be also an issue that's of relevance to the broader working class. When we look at even the $14 per hour minimum wage campaign, that is something that affects the working class who are not part of unions, because they're union members who are working less than $14 per hour now. When the union arrived, see, because the trade union and the class collaborators that are running the unions do not believe in the class struggle, they allow the state to attack social assistance, because even union members were opposed to the social assistance rate in the 90s. Union members were also opposed to the level of benefits that unemployed workers were getting until they became unemployed and realized that you can't live on the benefits that we're getting. That today, you only get 50% of your gross income, and only about 40% of people across Canada that qualifies for it. The thing, if we had a class struggle approach, we would have been challenging for more social entitlements, because those things would have gone to the social wage. Because, for example, if you have a national child care program and you're part of the working class, instead of spending $10,000 a year, and that's not a lot of money compared to the cost of child care, if you have a national child care program that's run by the state, that's paid for out of tax, you could be gaining like $17,000 in additional wages based on the quality of the service that you're getting. That is also a part of a way to push the class struggle, to push for these type of programs. So those type of programs become working class programs. But we also, what the things we have to do in terms of changing the minds of working class unionized members is that they don't see the public as a part of their class brothers and sisters. They see us as different, because how can we have unionized members administering welfare and following some of these rules? Instead of finding ways to subvert these rules, they implement it that and in a way that harms the working class. They do not see themselves as the unemployed workers as a member of a class that they're a part of, and they'll find ways to express solidarity. So we need in the labor movement for our education to facilitate class consciousness, and that doesn't exist in our union movement today. If a way that we can critique unions and seek changing it, when I mentioned the increasing bureaucratization of our unions and the professionalization that's going on, we actually need to cut the amount of staff that we have in the labor movement. In spite of the fact that staff are overworked in the labor movement, what we need to do with that money that we're paying staff now, and we would still need some amount of staff that are permanent, is for us to train members of the working class to do bargaining, to do health and safety, to do all of these technical things, and then get them back into the locals after 2 or 3 year stint, to then train other organizers to do health and safety, to do bargaining, to do all those things, because what we're trying to do is to reskill the working class so that they are involved in their own work. If we're also going to try to challenge bureaucratization, the leaders that are out there are working full time and working more than what we're earning these $100,000 salary. They need to earn a livable wage, so that being a union official doesn't become a permanent job and you'll fight tooth and nail to stay in that position. You know that after time, well, for one thing, is that while you're elected, you may serve 2 days or 3 days at the union office and 2 days on the bargaining floor. But many leaders today do not want to connect with the work with the shop floor once they've got elected in these vice president or secretary treasurer position. So we have to find ways to really change the union. Another thing that we can do, especially like radical locals, in terms of building links with the non-unionized working class, is to use some of our resources with radical community organizations to create organizers training programs, activist training programs, so that we can link the community and link the union and try to build a class struggle perspective in the labor movement. But at the same time, while we're supporting unions as an instrument of labor, we also have to fight the structures, trying to change the structures so that these entities can become member control and member led, and also members will have the proper ideology that would represent an anti-racist, an anti-patriarchal, an anti-capitalist perspective. And it's very clear that's not going on, because if 93% of Canadians can think of themselves as middle class, means that a lot of union members are also of that opinion, and also non-unionized members of the working class.
One of the things I think we have to realize, none of us are necessarily saying that unions have to be disbanded, you have to start from the ground up and do completely new structures, but at the same time you do have the responsibility, I think, to question what unions are currently doing and what they're not doing, and ask them to adjust their structures for the working class that are not represented. And there are victories, and there are places where working people are being organized, although slowly, and they're just few and far between. A few hotels here and there in Toronto, a couple soft manufacturing locations, but most of organizing is still defensive. It's preserving what is organized. That's the structure that forces unions to protect their turf. It's not an advancement of culture you're in right now. But one of the things you can talk about, a quick practice, is that in the 1990s, there was a lot of talk about unions had to switch away from servicing members to organizing new members. And about 15 minutes after that debate started, people recognized, you know what? People don't organize for organizing's sake. They organize so they get something to be serviced. Better wages, better working conditions, better benefits. So maybe what we need now is a servicing revolution where unions stop organizing. Just stop it. Don't organize anybody. Simply send the people you do have and spend some of your resources going out to workplaces and just start servicing people. Doesn't matter if they're a member of the union or not. Get an appointment, go into the door, talk to the employer and say, you know what, we really think everyone at this workplace needs $1.50 more an hour. And we're gonna do what we can in the community to put pressure on you until you do. Now, some people say, well, that's undemocratic, workers aren't involved, but my point is I think we come from a model where we think workers have the right to choose to be unions. That's the way HUDAC thinks. I think workers, in some rare cases, should have the right to not have unions, and we should start with everybody being unionized. So if you start thinking that way, then you can start getting into models of minority unionism and different ways of representing. And that goes back to the election. HUDAC backtracked on his right to work position, not because of what the labor movement did, even though they, Sid Ryan claims responsibility for the campaign he ran. HUDAC had messages from the business class and the elites that they didn't want to risk chaos if he tried it. And they also didn't want to risk the legal challenges and what they might get in case, and that would be minority unionism, because that's the trade-off in most right-to-work places, is that you get to go in and represent the workers who do want to be unionized, even if you don't have a majority. And as we talk about an embedded labor relations system, capitalists and business managers don't want to experiment with a new relation system. It's too unstable. They didn't want to take the risk. So I think that's just a couple of points of how you're going to really reach into especially racialized migrant worker communities that don't have the same power.
Yeah, and the question of labor self-management, if we're developing an infrastructure with the organizations, the institutions that are going to organize production under worker control, I am in favor of having the labor unions as a part of it, even in spite of the fact that it's workers who are controlling it, but as an act of solidarity, that it is necessary for workers in self-managed situations to also embrace the labor movement. And what I'm seeing right now in terms of worker cooperatives or labor self-managed workplaces, they have also embraced, they've embraced capitalism in spite of the fact that they are in a situation where labor is exercising control over capital, because they don't see themselves as part of the class struggle. If you're in a labor self-managed workplace, you should be committed to generalizing this experience across society, because ultimately, when we have a non-capitalist society, a socialist society, the workplaces will be managed by the workers. The workers are going to make decisions about productions. They're going to build, federations representing workers. So if you're doing that now while you're in capitalism, to me it is necessary to be a part of the labor movement that's representing workers, and it's also an act of solidarity. And also, by being a part of the labor movement, you can also push the idea of labor self-management, of workers controlling production, and also to see how we can, through the labor movement, expand that. Right now you have the United Steelworkers they have signed an agreement with Mondragon in Spain, the Basque region of Spain, to explore industrial cooperatives inside the United States. But at the same time, this is a union that's not committed to the class struggle. But for those of us who are organizing in the community, it may still be a good thing because it may create the dynamics, it may create the infrastructure that we can also benefit from, those of us who are organizing class struggle-oriented labor self-management. On the question of where do we start? We're going to start in communities. The communities are here. They're experiencing police violence. They're experiencing high levels of unemployment. We're talking about racialized working class communities. The communities, they're here. We have to go and work with the communities, working in building leadership that's already there, working with leadership that's already there to push the class struggle. And if 70% of the workers are outside of unions, I believe we have to organize, in addition to in the workplaces, we also have to organize in the community around issues of exploitation and oppression in the workplace. We have no other option because we're working to build mass movement to make these things possible. In the United States in the 1960s, when we experienced the rapid unionization of the federal public service, that coincided with the civil rights movement. That today, African American workers have the highest rates of unionization, but again, it's because they're highly represented in the public service. But they're among the most highly unionized. When we look at who are the people in the United States that are more inclined to vote or to certify or to vote for a union in the workplaces, in workplaces inside the United States, workplaces, bargaining units or prospective bargaining units with mostly African American women have the highest rate of certification or voting for unions. Next, you have African men. So there is a poll there was a report and a poll by Andrew Jackson from CLC, and we're looking at who are the people that are most likely to support unionization of their workplace. Racialized workers. They can see the benefits of unionization. That if they have the opportunity and there's no undue retaliation, they would vote for unionization more than white workplaces, more than white workers. So, and when we look at the fact that the workplace, is increasingly becoming racialized, we may find them they may be more open to the class struggle. Because one of the things about experiencing white supremacy in the society is that many of us from racialized groups, we have no illusion about what Canada is about. It will have its promise, and it will put out its propaganda about its values and the things that are its virtues, but we have no illusion around policing. We have no illusion about we're in unionized workplaces, that the white supremacist labor leadership will collude with the white bosses against racialized workers. We have no illusion about that. We have no illusion about being stopped in the street by police. We have no illusion about the promise of education in the system. So who are we going to organize among? The people who may be comfortable with the system as it is, or the people with a higher level of awareness about the oppression in this society?
I guess to me, it's saying, yeah, much as we can be critical of the labor movement, I also see labor movement, trade unions as the populist organizations that keep our society as a civil society. And so part of this process then becomes a transformation. It's, in a way, from as a racialized person who's been involved in the labor movement for a while, it's seeing how labor movement has missed more than 2 generations of activists that could have been much more involved, much more engaged. However, because of their race, the color, the gender, that they were excluded. And my sense is at this point, we can't afford to sit back and see that train wreck. And And part of it is, it's also in that sense saying, if this is going to be a social transformation project, and let's make sure race, gender, and class are not just rhetorics that people tag on. It's how do you really organize and make sure it reflects in both the union practice and as well as in the workplace. On the whole bargaining process, on workers' control, to me, I think workers' cooperatives, in a way, it's the epitome of what labor movement could be. It's that part of that progressions. When we talk about not being too wedded in the whole collective bargaining process, Steve talked about stop servicing. I mean, another idea would be, why can't we look at sectoral bargaining, organizing? Anyone who works in that particular sector, they should be part of the membership, right? And so in that sense, I'm also seeing the community chapter model of Uniform offers some reimaginations, offers some potential for reaching out to the workers who are in the informal sector, people who are freelance workers, and even former layoff workers. At least give them a sense of moving, organizing. It could be by neighborhood, it could be by community. But that's part of, to me, I think it's how do we maximize some of these pieces. On the municipal elections, I'm not going to be, I'm going to be quite candid. I'm going to support Olivia Chow.
Really?
Anyone, so yeah, and part of this is saying, I'm not going to try to say what's the other alternatives, but yeah, but it's saying if we are going to have pragmatic or reformist-minded mayor or people who are going to appease the capitalist system, then I might as well have someone who can represent half of the populations of Toronto, a racialized woman, and to me, I think that can be also a role model where encourage more community activists, the younger generations, to get their head, or at least look at elections, participation in elections as part of that civic engagement. So, I said it.
Thank you.